Recorded for the light novel every day. That way I have something I can upload, worst case, if I can't get any reviews done or whatever. Alright. The Archduke in the Italian restaurant. I had expected to return to the temple after lunch, but as my fever was still going strong come noon, Ferdinand decided to stay behind. He sent his attendants back to the temple without him, and it wasn't until later that afternoon that my fever finally went down. I suppose that should suffice, Ferdinand said. He put me onto his high beast, and we returned to the temple, accompanied by Daniel and Bridget, who followed on either side of us. Daniel, did you find a wife? I asked, having ultimately failed to spot him during the feast last night. He furrowed his brows sadly and shook his head. Unfortunately not. Uh-oh. Oh, never mind. I thought for a second I thought he was going to say he was blessed by your blessing. Though I have been blessed with the opportunity to guard you, Lady Rosamine, I have still been demoted to the rank of an apprentice knight. It would be hard for someone to consider marrying Daniel while he was still serving his punishment as a mere apprentice, to be sure. But he was still a knight of the Archduke's adopted daughter, in my opinion. It would be fine for him to set up an engagement before his punishment was up. Daniel also seemed to be getting more and more precious mana thanks to my blessing, so as far as I was concerned, anyone who decided to marry him would be getting a great deal. Well, there's always next year to look forward to, I said. It's hard to be too optimistic, but I'll try my best. How did things go for you, Bridget? Daniel asked casually. I watched Bridget timidly, already knowing about her circumstances. She lowered her gaze the moment our eyes met. I canceled a previous engagement following the passing of my father. I cannot imagine that there will ever be a second chance for me, Bridget said. Wearing such a stiff expression that my urge to help her somehow grew even stronger. We descended to the Noble's Gate and returned to my quarters, where Fran opened the door of perfect timing and welcomed us inside. Fran, but how? We didn't send word of our return. I noticed the high beast descending toward the Noble Gate, Fran said coolly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. In reality, he had probably been looking out the window the whole time that he was waiting for us. He really was a model attendant. I looked up at him, and he knelt down so that we could make eye contact. Lady Rosamine, it appears that you are not feeling well. You think so? Ferdinand gave me a potion, and my fever's gone down, so... As I touched my face and hands to check my temperature, Ferdinand shook his head. I trust Fran's word more than yours. Fran put Rosamine to bed. Do not let her do anything else today. As you wish. The two settled the matter without even giving me a chance to speak. At this rate, I would be forced into bed against my will. As Fran picked me up and headed to my room, I asked him a question. Fran, could you send a message to the Gilberta Company? Fran shook his head. Please postpone it until tomorrow, he said, using Ferdinand's order as a shield. It was true that I wasn't feeling particularly well, but there was stuff that I had to do. The last thing I needed was being stuck in bed, unable to do anything. It's very important. Sylvester has decided on the day he'll be visiting the eatery. I need to let them know. You can do that tomorrow, Fran replied, refusing to budge an inch. Very well, then. Sylvester and Father will be visiting the temple beforehand, but I can tell you the date tomorrow as well. Fran's shoulders twitched. The moment he heard that he was personally involved, a look of worry washed over his face. Tell me, Fran, can you predict the exact day that my adoptive father, the Archduke, will be coming? Making preparations will be quite difficult if you're not warned far ahead enough in advance. No? I understand. I will send a message to the Gilberta Company, but please make do with just a letter. A meeting will be too much. With that said, when is he coming? The day after tomorrow. At these words, Fran rushed to the High Bishop's chambers, his eyes blinking rapidly. Not only would he need to organize the room to avoid any possible embarrassment, but he also needed to prepare tea and food appropriate to the Archduke's taste, and there was a chance that what he had on hand wasn't of high enough quality. Please rest as soon as you've written the letter, Lady Rosamine. Yes, I know. Having secured Fran's permission, I hurriedly wrote a letter to Benno. I mentioned the date and time that the lunch would be taking place, how many people would be attending, and added some general warnings concerning the menu, then closed by asking them to send someone tomorrow afternoon to pick up the natural yeast. Go. Sorry to ask when you've only just gotten back from the workshop, but could I ask you to deliver this to the Gilberta Company? As you wish. Once I had finished my letter, Monica changed my clothes for me. As I crawled into bed, she made sure to give me a firm reminder that I was not to leave my bed until dinner time. Monica, how was the festival at the orphanage? Did the children have fun? I asked. Yes. This year, Wilma joined them in the towel throwing. The divine gifts were plentiful thanks to your request that the Blue Priests continue to have food prepared, and making the soup was not as tough as it was last year. I lazed about in bed as Monica told me what had happened while I was gone, and before I knew it, Gil had returned from delivering the message. They're already finished preparing. Benno said they'll be ready no matter when you come. Also, Leon will be coming by tomorrow to get that natural yeast, he said, holding out a response that Benno had written to me. I opened the letter, feeling relieved that he was on top of things as usual. Inside, he described that Frida and the Guildmaster will be participating in the lunch as fellow contributors to the establishment. They both knew that mine and Rosemine were the same person, and he wanted me to tell the Archduke that ahead of time. I didn't feel much better when the next day came around, so Fran forbade me from entering the director's chambers or the bookroom. After some negotiation, I was able to convince him that I wouldn't be able to rest without books to read. He brought me some from the bookroom, which meant that I could spend the whole day reading in bed. It was a very fulfilling, blissful day. In the afternoon, Nicola came to inform me that Leon had come for the natural yeast. Meanwhile, Fran was busily moving in and out of my room preparing for Sylvester and Karstad's arrival. The plan had been for Sylvester, Karstad, and their guards to arrive at Third Bell on the day of the lunch, but Sylvester was apparently so enthusiastic that he arrived well before Third Bell. I had been practicing my harpspiel with Rosina when Ferdinand guided the excited-looking man in, and Ferdinand and I exchanged exactly the same grimace. "Sylvester, please don't come sooner than promised," I said. "Rosemine is correct. How many times do I need to tell you that other people have their own lives too?" All right. But what's the issue? We're still going to be heading to the eatery at the same time we agreed on," Sylvester said, casually blowing us off. Karstad placed a weary hand on his forehead and explained that despite how it may seem, he had held Sylvester back for as long as he could. "I commend you for trying, at least." Eckert and Cornelius were standing behind them. It had been agreed that Eckert would be coming from the very start since Karstad needed a guard while he was eating, but Cornelius was underage, and I was pretty sure that no plans had been made for him to come. "Cornelius, will you be joining us?" I asked. "Yeah, I'm your bodyguard too, after all." He thumped his chest twice and gave me a confident grin, but I had a feeling he was only here because he didn't want to be left out of something that seemed like fun. I love this. I like Cornelius. He's cool. Well, Eckert too, but we haven't gotten to see very much of him and Lampret. I looked at Eckert for confirmation, who explained with a teasing look that since guards ate on alternating shifts, Cornelius had offered to serve as his partner. It seemed that he had basically forced his way into joining. No point sending him back now that he's here. Give him a visitor's welcome too, Rosemine. He's your family. "Sylvester, aren't you in the High Priest family as well?" I asked, looking at Ferdinand in hope that he would handle Sylvester himself. He looked down at me and with a grimace noted that he would handle him once the meal was over. "Thank you." "Thank you, Ferdinand. You are awesome, as always." While Fran was preparing tea, I allowed Sylvester and my brothers to investigate my chambers while I began writing another letter to Benno. I needed to tell him I was bringing more guards than we had anticipated. He had seemed so confident about his food stores that a single extra person probably wouldn't pose much of a problem. But knowing something like this ahead of time would likely make things a lot easier on him emotionally. I also recorded how people were dressed and asked that he feed this information back to Frida and the Guildmaster. It would be best if everyone dressed fairly similarly. I could imagine that a single person wearing different clothes and sticking out would make them extremely uncomfortable. "Rosina, please give this letter to those who come to get you." Understood. Rosina will be playing harpspiel for us during the meal. A carriage from the Gilberta Company would be sent for her ahead of time at Third Bell so that she could arrive at the eatery before us. Today she was wearing a light blue dress that I had purchased through Benno for this specific occasion, and it looked incredible on her. "Lady Rosemond, I must be going. I shall see you soon," Rosina said with an elegant smile before fleeing the room of an archnobles prior to Third Bell. Nicola, who was basically descending into a small panic over my visit from the Archduke, over our visit from the Archduke and the commander of the Knights Order, watched her go with envy. "Nicola, please serve cookies to everyone. You may taste test them and choose the tastiest ones." "Yes, milady, you can count on me." Amused by how eagerly Nicola rushed to the kitchen to begin taste testing, I headed over to Sylvester, who was enjoying the tea that Fran had served him. Thank goodness. Despite the fact that it was just before lunch, he was stuffing his face full of the cookies that Nicola was serving him while raving about how good they were. Cornelius watched on with frustrated envy, unable to eat as he was standing behind him as a guard. "Oh, it sucks, Cornelius. I wish I could sneak you a cookie." When fourth bell rang, more carriages arrived from the Gilberta Company. One was for me, Ferdinand, Sylvester, and Karstad, another was for my brothers, Daniel and Bridget, and the last was for Fran and Ferdinand's 3 attendants. Our sizable train of 3 carriages headed toward the restaurant. "What the heck's wrong with this carriage?" Sylvester exclaimed. His eyes flared open in anger. He was clearly annoyed that commoner carriages shook unlike the ones in the Nobles Court. And that's how carriages are. This is just how carriages are in the are in the lower city. The ones in the nobles' quarter use magic tools, remember? And the roads there are flat and straight. Yeah. Only thing I could think of as to fixing it is to somehow make asphalt and make the roads better. That's the only thing I could think of, because that would make the carriage ride smoother. This is just how carriages... Rosemont, can't you use that knowledge of yours to fix this? Forget about books. These carriages are a travesty. I'd never even ridden in a carriage before coming here. I don't know a single thing about how it could be done to fix them. I had never had any interest in the structure of carriages since I had never had any plans to ride one. I might have read a paragraph or two about how suspension was used to lessen the impact of the shaking, but I didn't remember enough details to give Johann a concrete order. And it smells just as bad as it did last time, Sylvester commented, scrunching up his face in a grimace, and no doubt recalling when he had passed through the lower city to go hunting. Dude. You do realize that commoners don't have regular toilets like you guys do. They have to toss it out, and where do you think it goes? No wonder it stinks. Dude, if you hate it that much, why don't you dedicate some of your budget to improving sanitation in the lower city? Yeah, hello. Is that truly something you could fix with money? Carson asked, looking at me with great interest. There was so much anticipation in his voice that it was actually kind of painful. The smell would, for the most part, disappear if we could build a proper sewage system. I don't know everything that would entail, though. Are books seriously the only thing you know about? Sheesh, your knowledge sure is useless half the time, Sylvester bellowed at me, but his yelling wouldn't change that my interests had always been focused on a single point that I prioritized above all else, books. I could think about other things once they were taken care of. Why would I bother to remember precise details about things I don't need or care about? Do you remember everything you've ever learned, Sylvester? I asked. I leave that job to Ferdinand. Yeah, Ferdinand probably would have a better memory, but even still... You can't remember everything you've learned. Over time, you're going to forget things. And besides, she probably considering she's read books about just about anything, she might be able to recall something, though, considering how bad apparently her memorization is. I'm surprised she remembered this much as she has remembered. About how to make stuff, even though she's already made some of that stuff in her previous life. Why are you proudly puffing out your chest? That's not something to be proud of. I looked at Sylvester, feeling exhausted before we had even arrived at our destination. Sylvester, I would like to perceptively inform you of who will be joining us at the meal, I said, before going on to explain everything that Benno had asked me to in the letter. I mentioned for Frida and the Guildmaster first, and that they knew me from before my baptism. A merchant who has a sharp nose for profit, huh? Got it. I'll decide on how to deal with him once I see him. We arrived at the Italian restaurant midway through Sylvester's sentence. He closed his mouth and put on the Archduke face that he wore in public. This was a pretty big eatery since it was in the north of town, but it was the same size as the other 6-story buildings around it. From the outside, it was almost impossible to tell that it had been modeled after the mansion of a noble. The attendants alighted from their carriages first, carrying our things. What things? What did you bring? Well, what am I saying? They probably brought their own plates and stuff. Then the guards disembarked from theirs. Once the outside of the restaurant had been cleaned and cleared of any obstacles to make the walk to the front door easier, Karstedt descended from the carriage with Ferdinand, then helped me down, leaving Sylvester the Archduke to climb out last. The 3 carriages lined up next to each other were drawing the attention of passerby. Even those who didn't know who we were could tell at a glance that we were obscenely rich, and an increasingly growing peanut gallery started to form a reasonable distance away. Let's hurry inside, Sylvester, I suggested. The door was shut behind us as we entered, blocking off most of the corridor smell and freeing us from the intrigued eyes of the public. I let out a sigh of relief and turned around to see Benno, the Guildmaster, Frida, and the waiters all kneeling with their arms crossed in front of their chests. It had been a long time since I had last seen Frida, but I couldn't casually bring that up since I wasn't mine anymore. Feeling a bit lonely, I listened to Benno give a lengthy greeting as their representative. If you're that lonely when it comes to seeing Frida, dude, why didn't you try and at least have tea with her or something once in a while, instead of blowing her off like you did? We are the owners and employees of the Italian restaurant. May the serendipitous meeting ordained by the vibrant summer rays of Leidenschaft, the god of fire, be blessed by the gods. May this meeting be blessed. When I had last visited the Italian restaurant, its interior decoration hadn't even been finished yet. It looked entirely different now. There were ornate window frames and doors. The walls were adorned with tapestries, carpet had been laid, and the various paintings and flower-filled vases served to punctuate the already opulent atmosphere. The entrance hall was furnished with benches and chairs so that it doubled as a waiting room, and I could see the decorations that Rosina and Fran had picked out some time ago. This is the room where your honorable guards will be eating. As it was not built with serving and nobles in mind, it is of slightly lower quality than the main dining hall, but I beg your forgiveness for this. Benno was referring to a single room which had a sizable table and several chairs. It was apparently an eating area for staff members, but could also be used as an extra waiting room while the main room was being cleaned. Or cleared. Since it hadn't been designed for actual customers, the fact that it was too simple for noble guards could hardly be helped. This is the dining hall. Impressive. Feels like one that a med noble or lay noble might have. It's hard to imagine this is in the lower city, Sylvester said. I appreciate your kind words, Benno replied, visible relief on his face. The restaurant that he had spent so much time and money on had gotten direct approval from the Archduke himself, so I could understand his reaction. Elaborately carved, waist-high wainscoting ran along the wall, alongside a number of shelves that were decorated with expensive-looking plates and vases, plus a picture book that I had made, and the origami wishing crane that I had given Benno a very long time ago. The tables were polished to a glossy sheen and had as many napkins and menus as there were people seated. There was also a vase of seasonal flowers in the middle of each table, kept short enough that it wouldn't obscure the vision of customers sitting across from each other. They had even added a cute little bell used to summon the waiter. I gave a big nod of satisfaction. Now then, please follow me. Once we had looked around the restaurant to our heart's content, we were guided to our table. Eckert stood at the door facing the table, while Bridget stood on the other side of the door outside the room. Meanwhile, Daniel and Cornelius headed to the side room. I shall now introduce those who funded the establishment of this restaurant. First is Lady Rosemine, the Archduke's adopted daughter. The menu being served today consists largely of recipes provided by her. Next is Gustav, the guildmaster of the Merchants Guild, and his granddaughter Frida. They contributed greatly to the training of our waiters and chefs. Benno introduced the Archduke to those who would be eating with us, and that was when I learned the guildmaster's name for the first time. Gustav. You two, huh? Sylvester shot Frida and the guildmaster a piercing glare, knowing that they knew my past as mine. The guildmaster was always so domineering and arrogant in my memories, but here he was practically cowering as he kept his arms crossed over his chest. Gustav and Frida, I hear that you are both wise individuals, that you have sharp noses for profit, and the skill to seize opportunities that others would miss. In that case, I imagine you both already know what to do. Am I right to think that? Of course. We will do everything in our power to assist you, my lord. Good. Soon my daughter will be starting a significant new industry. I ask that you aid her efforts. Sylvester indirectly ordered them to assist Benno without dragging their feet, and it seemed that the guildmaster fully intended to do just that. He was kind of a greedy person, but he had saved my life before, so it was a relief to know that he'd be staying on our side. He kind of would be sealing his own fate if he tried to go against you guys, so yeah. Frida, feeling more at ease now that the Archduke was no longer staring daggers at her, made eye contact with me. We both smiled and nodded at each other. She would be living in the nobles' quarter when she grew up, so I wanted to make sure we stayed on good terms. While Benno was giving his introductions, Fran was with Ferdinand's attendants, preparing the cutlery and dishes we had brought ourselves. The waiters were taking care of everyone else's dishes, and I spotted Leon among them. The food itself was brought on a serving cart covered in pots and big plates. The attendants and waiters started taking the plates off, each preparing to serve their respective bosses. Fran will be serving the Archduke today, while Zahn will be serving me. Status-wise, the Archduke needed to be served first, but this was the first time that anyone was working here, and nobody wanted to be the one to improperly serve the Archduke these unique dishes. After a brief discussion, it was decided that Fran was the most used to my cooking, and should thus serve the Archduke while everyone else observed what he did. So this is today's menu, huh? Sylvester picked up the board that had been set on the table in front of him and looked it over with great interest. I could see a grin forming on his face as he saw the list of various dishes that he had never eaten before. Nice! Leon began by serving fluffy bread so freshly baked that it was still steaming. Its enticing aroma stirred my hunger, making me want to eat as soon as possible. Karsten and Ferdinand looked at the bread in surprise, since it didn't look like the bread they were used to, while Frida and the guildmaster saw glances in my direction. Fran smoothly set a plate down in front of Sylvester. On it was a mound of potato salad, made with handmade mayonnaise. Wow, you guys have mayo! Who would have thought? How did y'all manage that? Partly surrounded by steamed bird and vegetable salad, which had been shaped into a crescent and topped with faux Italian dressing. Almighty King and Queen of the endless skies, who doth grace us with thousands upon thousands of lives to consume. Almighty Eternal Five who rule the mortal realm, I offer thanks and prayers to thee, and do partake in the meal so graciously provided. Once everyone's food had been served, we all offered prayers. Once that was done, I picked up my fork. Those who invited others to a meal ate first, partially to demonstrate that the food hadn't been poisoned. Yep, tasty. I chowed down on my food and saw that Sylvester was immediately digging in. His love for new things was evident by how he ignored the vegetable salad and instead went straight for the potato salad, which he had never seen before. That was the complete opposite to Ferdinand, who went for the familiar-looking salad before anything else. I watched Sylvester carefully to see how he would react. He chewed for a moment, then widened his eyes in shock and looked at me. Rosemine, what is this stuff? I've never tasted anything like it before, he said, his deep green eyes shining with excitement. He was apparently fond of potato salad. Nice! It's called potato salad. You boil potatoes, crush them, put in other vegetables, and mix it all together with mayonnaise. Does it not suit your taste? Like I said, I've never tasted anything like it before, but it's not bad. Yeah, not bad at all. Wonder how they made the mayo. I'd love to know that. Come on, guys, show us. He really did seem to like it, which reminded me that Letz's brothers had been super pumped too back when I first taught them how to make mayonnaise. Wait, when did you do that? They said that it made bitter, previously nasty vegetables actually taste good. Incidentally, I had never made mayo by myself before since becoming mine. Mixing the ingredients required a lot of strength, and as there was no electric mixers or anything, I had no choice but to ask for help. Carson, seeing Sylvester ignore the vegetable salad entirely to focus on the potato salad, tried some potato salad himself. He chewed for a bit, then nodded. Its flavor is certainly unique, but not in a bad way. It was only once he had seen both of their reactions that Ferdinand took a fairly small bite himself. His expression barely changed, but given that he then put even more in his mouth, I could tell that he was satisfied with how it tasted. Well, I mean, if you don't like something, why would you put more of it in your mouth, you know? Benno had been observing the three archnobles to see how they reacted as closely as I had, and upon seeing their approval, he relaxed his shoulders a bit and started eating from his own plate. He, Frida, and the Guildmaster had all eaten the practice dishes made by the chefs, so while they did enjoy the food, none of them looked surprised in the least while eating. Sylvester, I said as I saw him reaching to get more potato salad, please try the other salad. He hadn't even touched the steamed bird yet. With a small grimace born from a hatred of vegetables. I don't blame him. I'm not very fond of vegetables too much. I will eat some. I mean, I eat potatoes, I eat lettuce, I eat broccoli, carrots, onions, green peppers, cauliflower, shoot, I don't even remember what else. Spinach. Pickles. I mean, I eat that stuff. I just don't eat like some of the crazy ones. Sylvester stabbed a fork into his salad. He chewed loudly for a bit and then blinked in surprise and took another bite. Rosemine, this salad's unnaturally good. What kind of sauce did you put on it? I put herb dressing on it. It's made of plant oil, salt, citrus fruit, and some edible herbs. But the flavor changes depending on what you make it with. In this world, it was standard practice to cook sauces, and most of them were made using meat juice. They even put a sauce that was similar to gravy on vegetables. That tasted good in its own way, but it often led to the vegetables getting all greasy, which I wasn't too fond of. What are the white chunks on top of the vegetables? Looks like bird meat, but they're soft and taste kind of different. Bird meat is right. It took extra time to prepare, but the flavor was worth it, don't you think? Don't you agree? Even Sylvester, with his distaste for vegetables, readily finished the whole salad, then tried asking Fran for seconds. Sylvester, if you fill up on salad now, you won't be able to eat any of the other foods we prepared, I said. Good point. I picked up a portion of fluffy bread and tore off a bite-sized piece, indicating that others could do the same if they wanted. It was still steaming hot, and the sweet scent of freshly baked bread rose in the air the moment I pulled it apart. I tossed the piece into my mouth, enjoying the warm sweetness and soft mouthful. Tastes like Hugo's baking. Even though they were using the same recipe, Hugo's bread always came out slightly different from Ella's thanks to his higher level of precision and skill. A smile spread across my face as I enjoyed the familiar taste, at which point I noticed Frida eagerly grabbing a piece herself. It seemed that she had been carefully waiting for me to try some first. The moment that Frida still touched the still warm bread, she looked up at me in surprise. She hadn't expected that it would be so soft, and squeezed it in her hand a few times as if confirming that she wasn't mistaken. She then tore off a piece and ate it. Her eyes shot open wide, and she placed a hand over her mouth as she chewed. The sparkles in her brown eyes grew steadily brighter, and I could easily tell that she was calculating the potential for profit in her head. You ain't getting that yeast, girl. Heck no. No matter how much you beg. I don't care how much money you offer. You ain't getting that yeast. Lady Rosemine, I have never before eaten bread this soft, so that tastes so naturally sweet on its own. I would very much like to serve it here. As expected, she jumped on the opportunity. I had expected as much since I hadn't even taught Hugo how to make the natural yeast, instead of just giving him the yeast I had made myself. Now then, how should I turn her down, I thought, only to have Sylvester grin and interject before I could say anything. Frida, right? Sorry, but that's not going to happen. This bread is a secret recipe that I'm going to use to surprise nobles in the winter, he said, before looking at me with gleaming green eyes. I fully intended to use the fluffy bread to strengthen my position in noble society, so I had no disagreements there. Sylvester is correct. I allowed the chefs to make this bread since Sylvester and Father were visiting, but it will only be revealed to the world come winter. I see, that is a shame, Frida said with a smile before taking another bite. From what I understand, Lace was her only chef, and I can imagine that she wanted her to try some too. It certainly tastes good, but, Karsten, who was halfway through his third bread roll, furrowed his brows and thought, this bread being this soft actually makes it a bit unsatisfying. I reckon I could keep eating these forever and still never feel full. Chewing wasn't an important factor when it came to feeling full and satisfied. I made a mental note that Karsten liked harder bread, making sure that he had as much fluffy bread as was needed to satisfy him would probably be a huge blow to my wallet. And this is consomme soup. A large pot of soup was wheeled into the room on another cart, and an aroma that caught everyone's attention immediately filled the room. The clear amber-colored soup inside had no vegetables or anything mixed into it, and had been cooked just enough that the umami had concentrated. Nothing in this entire region would taste anything like it, since here it was completely normal for people to boil vegetables and then toss away the broth. It smells nice, but there's nothing in it, Sylvester said with a confused look after watching Fran pour some soup for him. In the culinary world here, everyone understood soup to be a pile of vegetables that were boiled to the point of being overcooked. Soup that lacked visible ingredients simply did not exist. The flavor becomes more apparent when there isn't anything in it. I think you'll be surprised by how tasty it is, I said, bringing my face close to my bowl so I could enjoy this. I cannot talk right! So that I could enjoy the smell. It had a thick aroma that made my mouth water. I dipped my spoon into the amber soup that had been delicately strained over and over again, and the appetizing smell grew even stronger as tiny ripples spread along its surface. Then I put the spoon in my mouth, rolling the consomme over my tongue to enjoy the concentrated umami taste. What was umami? Is that... No, umami's not squid. What the heck is umami? Let me know. The thick, deep aroma had a surprising, refreshing aftertaste. And I couldn't help but sigh in awe. Hugo had obviously worked hard on it. Maybe it was because Hugo had so much more experience, but honestly, this was several times better than the consomme that Ella had made. I'll be the judge of that, Sylvester said, putting a spoonful of soup in his mouth. His eyes shut open, then started to gleam with delight as he immediately ate some more. On his third spoonful, he moved the soup around in his mouth while blinking in confusion. What flavor is this? It has hints of meat, vegetable, and all sorts of other things in it. It's a soup that has a concentrated umami taste. It can be used to add flavor to other meals, too. Ferdinand tightly knit his brow, a look of pure bewilderment on his face as he ate the consomme. He would think an expression like that would be a sign that he hated it, but the speed at which he was eating suggested otherwise. Ferdinand, you seem confused about something. Does it not suit your palate? No, I find this soup to be quite beautiful, he said. While I sat there confused as to why Ferdinand would praise the food for its appearance rather than its taste, he wiped his mouth with a napkin and explained, Indeed, it truly is beautiful. You can tell from a single sip how deep the flavor is, and how many ingredients were used to form it. No, each has its own delicious taste, but here they have been fused and condensed into one, and yet there is nothing in the soup itself. It is so clear that one could see through to the bottom. The soup has a beauty that has been refined to perfection. It was still a bit hard for me to understand what he meant, and I definitely hadn't expected him to talk about it at such length. It remains safe to assume that he really liked the consomme soup. The next course has been prepared, a waiter announced, pushing over another cart. On it was another main dish. Oh boy, here we go. Macaroni gratin. It had been baked in small ceramic bowls, which were now set on wooden plates with handles to make them easier to hold. These brown bowls are extremely hot, so take care not to touch them under any circumstances. Please hold the wooden pan parts when eating. Everyone could tell it from a single glance that the gratin had only just been taken out of the oven. Well, I mean, of course. Steam was coming off of the still bubbling white sauce, and the cheese atop it was moving. The aroma coming from the white steam carrying the crisp smell of cooked cheese was irresistible. Since this world lacked macaroni, I settled on making handmade farfalle pasta. It complemented the white sauce well, and nobody would have to worry about any boiling sauce getting caught inside and scalding their tongue. It was perfect. Rosamund, is this baked cheese? It's something similar. Take care not to burn your tongue while eating. That's why you need to blow on it. There were several commonplace noble recipes that involve putting cheese on birds or vegetables before baking them, and I had eaten meat sauce before, but nothing here tasted like white sauce. Maybe it didn't yet exist, or maybe I had just coincidentally never tried it. I wrapped some of the hot cheese around a piece of parfalo, blew on it, and then put it in my mouth. Strong feelings of joy washed over me the moment it touched my palate. Since the ingredients here were somewhat different, the resulting dish had a flavor unlike what I was used to, but it was a recipe that my Earth mom had used to make back in my Irano days. Rosemine. Sylvester took a single bite before looking at me with narrowed eyes. How is this anything like baked cheese? It tastes nothing like what I'm used to. Well, it's cheese, and it was baked in the oven, so I think it's fair to say that they're similar. Everything else is completely new to me. What's this droopy white stuff, for example? I like it. I had elected to make a menu of recipes that resembled what you might expect to find on a kid's menu at a family restaurant, especially specifically for Sylvester's visit, because he thinks of him as a kid. It seemed that this decision had been a resounding success. I couldn't help but let out a small giggle at the sight of Sylvester's glimmering green eyes as he scooped up the white sauce. That is white sauce. It is made using butter, milk, and flour with salt to taste. As I thought, white sauce didn't exist here. Karsten took one bite of grunt before setting his fork down. I looked over to him, see him staring at me, a serious expression on his face. He must not have liked it. When you were living with me, I tried a lot of the strange sweets that you had your chef make, but she never made anything like this outside of the baptism ceremony. Did your chefs make this food too, Rosemine? Sylvester raised his head with a "Come again?" the moment that he heard Karsten say strange sweets, but I ignored that and replied to Karsten. My mother is not so careless as to trust the kitchen to a chef who had only just arrived. My chef earned her trust by making sweets, and only recently have we begun exchanging recipes. It will still be some time before she allows my chef to make actual meals. I see. Some time, Elvira prioritized getting sweets recipes for her tea parties. From what I can remember, she hadn't exchanged more than a few normal recipes with her, and Ella had told me she had mainly been tasked with making sweets during the baptism ceremony. It was a shame that I'd ended up passing out before actually getting to eat anything. At that moment, Cornelius walked into the room with a satisfied smile, having finished eating first. I am here to relieve you of your duties, he said to Eckert. Guards were ordered to eat quickly since they ate in shifts, but as I understood it, they were being served the same things that we were, and judging by how Cornelius was happily patting his stomach, he had eaten his fill. Eckert, who had only been able to watch everyone else eat, power-walked out of the room, his flat expression not faltering for a second. Daniel and Bridget were probably changing places outside the door. A cart was pushed into the room right as Eckert left. It was the second dish of the meal and the first with meat. I prepared this thinking that you would like some meat dishes, Sylvester. It's called, Hamburg steak stew! Okay, I like that. I never actually tried Hamburg steak, to be completely honest, but I imagine it's, I'd have to look it up, actually, what it is. I've heard of it, because it's in, the Aristocrats' Otherworldly Adventure, except it's not a stew, but yeah. I said I was sure that he would like it, and as expected, his eyes were gleaming. In truth, making Hamburg steak here wasn't easy, since mincing meat was so much work, and buying ground beef flat out like I would back in my Irano days just wasn't an option. But Hugo and Todd had worked hard for my sake. They used knives to chop the meat like crazy until it was adequately minced, then wrapped cheese inside so that it would flow out when cut. Next, they peeled the skin off of a yellow tomato-like vegetable called a palme, which was diced and cooked in consomme soup before dipping the grilled hamburg in the soup to stew it further. Or grilled hamburger. Frida and I were already getting full, so our Hamburg steaks were only half as big as everyone else's. As my fork pierced the small round piece of meat on my plate, clear juices flowed out, followed by thick yellow cheese a moment later. Something's coming out, Sylvester yelled. That's cheese, I replied, putting my knife away to show the sticky cheese stretching along with it. I cut off a bite-sized piece of steak, making sure to cover it in cheese sauce, then placed it in my mouth. Too good! Nothing could beat palme sauce made with high-quality consomme. Sylvester must have been really impatient because he lunged at his own Hamburg steak the second I took a bite of mine, hastily slicing off a piece and forking it into his mouth. His eyes widened and he nodded hard. Oh, this tastes great. I like this the most out of everything I've tried so far. I knew that I could count on you to like it, Sylvester. I'm glad it suits your taste so well. Karsten and Ferdinand ate silently, the former cutting his steak into big chunks which he eagerly chewed through, while the latter smoothly sliced it into smaller pieces, which he gracefully consumed. But despite their differing approaches, the meat was disappearing from both plates just as quickly. How is it, Ferdinand? You used the soup from before to make the sauce, correct? The taste is excellent. Profound, even. To think that it would be used in this manner as well. Ferdinand seemed to really like the consomme and once again began to eloquently extol its virtues at great length. Oh my god. Right? It's very beautiful. One nom nom nom. Hamburg steak is so good. Having made his way through the main dishes, Sylvester was leaning back with a blissful expression on his face, but things weren't over yet. There was still one more course. I was already full, but I had a second stomach when it came to dessert. I can make it. I can keep going. As the attendant set down plates and busily moved around to prepare tea, Leon came in pushing a cart and announcing the dessert for the day. Atop the cake cart were shortcakes, which had been cut into 5-centimeter wide squares and were decorated with seasonal fruit. Pure white cream was piled on top of each, with the gleaming red brooch rib crowning the center. Or butt rib. It was the very image of a strawberry shortcake. It had been extremely tough to make. Managing the oven's heat wasn't easy, so it had taken a long time to reach a point where our attempts could be described as a success. That said, when it did eventually happen, it definitely was tasty. Judging by how the pieces that Leon had brought out were cut, I could guess that the sides had gotten too hard to eat. They had probably only brought out the edible parts. Another cart came in carrying the cake we had prepared ahead of time, just in case the shortcake didn't come out right. It was a cake that I had particularly liked called a mill crepe, which was made by piling crepes on top of one another and slathering a thin layer of cream between them. To make it look even more beautiful, it was covered with a layer of orange sauce made from cooking the juice from an apple sage with sugar. Its refreshing summer smell and taste complemented the cake well. Atop the last wagon pushed inside were 2 pound cakes, one made using tea and the other made using plenty of distilled liquor for the men who weren't too fond of sweet things. Lace had baked these ahead of time, meaning that they had been able to sit overnight, so the flavors should have definitely settled. Sylvester looked at the various wagons that Leon had pushed in and immediately asked me which dessert was best. I told him to pick whichever one he liked, at which point he started to glare from cake to cake, fiercely deliberating which one he wanted. I was absolutely certain that he was yelling, "Everything! Give me everything on the inside!" More than likely, yes. I wouldn't blame him, of course. Leon would, of course, obey if Sylvester actually ordered everything, but waiters weren't allowed to speak unless spoken to. He had finished preparing the tea and could do nothing but watch him waver in his decision. He looked increasingly distressed and ultimately turned to me for help. "Sylvester, there is no need to think so hard about this. They were cut into small pieces ahead of time so that they all could fit on your plate at once." "Smart thinking. In that case, I'll take them all," Sylvester declared, flaring his nostrils in satisfaction. Well, the fact that Sylvester picked them all should make it easier for anyone else who wants to taste test each one. Sometimes him having the heart of an elementary schooler comes in handy. It hadn't been too long ago that I had eaten one of the shortcakes prepared by Ella, so I selected the milk crepe instead, as planned. Meanwhile, Ferdinand and Carstairs requested one of everything. Benno asked for one of each of the pound cakes, and Frida and the Guildmaster opted for the shortcake. I leisurely enjoyed my cake while sipping my tea. The apple sage tart flavor tasted great alongside its restrained sweetness. Those of us who had eaten these cakes before to taste test them in the early stages all appeared very satisfied as we enjoyed our favorites, while Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Carstairs each seemed to eat in their own unique way. Sylvester had his eyes closed and seemed to be comparing the taste of each dessert. Ferdinand was eating them one at a time, wearing a contemplative frown the entire time. "Why are you frowning? You're good!" And Carstairs cleared his plate in the blink of an eye before requesting seconds. Wow. Pretty good, huh? I'm glad to see that our first customers are so pleased, I thought to myself, feeling the satisfaction of a job well done. Okay, let's see. 38 minutes. That was one chapter. 38 minutes took one chapter. Or one chapter took 38 minutes, but I mean it was the freaking eatery, of course. Whatever. Making a monastery. Sylvester wore a satisfied grin as he sipped his tea, having completely devoured the desserts. Not a bad lunch, if I do say so myself. I honestly wasn't expecting much from a lower city eatery, but the food tastes good enough to prove me wrong. "Your praise is greatly appreciated," Benno said, his voice containing the emotional sincerity of someone who had pushed themselves to their absolute limit to make sure the meal was a success. Frida and the Guildmaster seemed just as pleased, beaming at the knowledge that they had successfully hosted the Archduke of all people at their eatery. "I am very interested to see what the future holds for this restaurant," Sylvester said. Then his expression hardened, everyone straightened their backs, sensing that things were about to get serious. "All right, Benno, it's about time you tell me what you learned on your trip. Clear the room." On Sylvester's order, Benno directed the waiters and attendants to leave. Rosina stopped playing music and exited as well, but her harpspiel in hand. Only now could they go and eat lunch. Benno hesitated for a moment, then turned to look at Frida and the Guildmaster. While they were unrelated to the orphanage investigation, we would need as much help from the Guildmaster as we could get when branching out the Rosemine workshop. Frida, you may leave, but I would like to ask the Guildmaster to stay and listen. Benno, why are you keeping him here? Sylvester asked. Gustav is the Guildmaster of the Merchants Guild. He has better connections with Ehrenfest's major stores than I do, and will be able to progress a lot more quicker if word spreads about the business we're setting up here. In other words, the Guildmaster would no doubt be wrapped up in whatever Sylvester's next unreasonable demand for Benno was, so it was more convenient for him to stay and be involved from the start. I could guess that Gustav would soon have to whip his old body into shape to keep up with us. My sympathies, but, well, maybe he'll be fine, since he still seemed to be full of energy. Well then, Eckert, guard the door. Everyone else, ensure that nobody attempts to come in. Once the guards that were lined up in front of the door had received Sylvester's orders, they did exactly as they were told. Eckert stayed behind while the other three left for Frida. As they passed through the door, Mark entered and stood behind Benno. The door closed, and silence fell over the room. We had planned ahead to weather whatever storm was going to hit us today, but we were dealing with Sylvester here. There was no telling what he might demand. As tensions rose, Ferdinand looked at Benno. Your report, then. Benno faced the Archduke and repeated what he had already told Ferdinand. He very carefully explained the orphanage situation, the financial state of the city, and then how the plan's success depended on the scholars put in charge. I could guess that Sylvester had already heard everything from Ferdinand, as his expression didn't change in the slightest as he listened to Benno. The report was only being repeated for the sake of appearances, and so that Gustav could hear. With all that in mind, Rosemine, what do you think we should do? Sylvester asked, shifting his gaze to me once Benno had finished. I exchanged looks with Benno, then turned to face Sylvester. I believe that despite the cost and effort that it will involve, we need to set up an entirely new orphanage and workshop. I would like the workshop to operate under my rules and do not wish to have any unnecessary disputes with the city's authorities. I went ahead and explained the differences between the orphanage in the temple and the one in the city. Sylvester nodded, encouraging me to continue. Right now, the temple has very few blue priests, but in excess of gray priests. I think it will be wise to send several gray priests and shrine maidens over to a new orphanage and workshop where they can teach the orphans how to live and work according to the principles developed here. To that end, I would appreciate it if we could build a small chapel of sorts for these gray priests to live in, which would also give me an excuse to visit. Having an entirely new building constructed for the orphans would be beneficial in both protecting them from harassment from the city's authorities and smoothly adjusting them to our way of life. It would also help to prepare them for the printing business expanding over time. Once I had listed out everything I had discussed with Benno, Sylvester shot a glance his way. If we make this workshop, would you have the tools ready soon? We had already ordered the tools ahead of time just in case Sylvester told us to borrow space in the city and run a workshop from there while we waited for the orphanage to be built. Benno gave a firm nod. We have already begun our preparations, but depending on the number of orphans and how old they are, they may not be strong enough to print. Are you suggesting that the workshop focus on making paper then? Yes, Sylvester, that is exactly right, I interjected, trying to back Benno up. Printing will require as much paper as we can get. There will never be a time when we don't want more. Sylvester nodded while stroking his chin, then broke out into a mischievous smile. All right then, in that case, I will heed Rosemine's request, and order the construction of a workshop, an orphanage, and a monastery with a chapel. I am eternally grateful. I really hadn't expected my request to be accepted so easily. Benno and I exchanged a nod, silently agreeing that we would immediately need to discuss which construction workshop we should hire and what orders we should make, but Sylvester interrupted us by suddenly pointing at Ferdinand. Ferdinand, you do it. That won't be a problem, but whose mana should we use for the protection magic? Why not Rosemine's? She can handle it. I'm sorry, what? They had suddenly started talking about something that I didn't understand in the slightest. A metaphorical question mark appeared over my head as Ferdinand gave Sylvester a nod, let out a short laugh, and then took out a pen and paper. He started writing something using one of those magic pens that didn't need any ink. I desperately wanted to peek at what he was scrolling down, but as it was bad manners to lean forward, I kept still. Rosemine, will a workshop of the same size as the temple suffice? How many rooms will the orphanage need? A workshop of the same size will work just fine. As for the number of rooms, I believe that about half as many will do, even if more orphans enter the orphanage later. Agreed. Considering the city's population, that should be more than enough. The chapel needn't be particularly large either. Should the orphanage be separated into male and female buildings as well? Ferdinand asked, nodding at my replies as he continued to write on the paper. I had no idea what he was writing down, or what he was thinking. There will need to be a basement storeroom for food and products that can be accessed by both the girls' and boys' buildings. I think the workshop should be in the basement of the boys' building, the kitchen in the basement of the girls' building, and the dining hall on the first floor of the girls' building. In that case, I will make the first floor of the boys' building the chapel, and place the hallways and staircases here. The dormitories will be on the second floor of each building. Your room, Rosemary, will be registered with Mana and kept locked under most circumstances. I shall make it so that you can enter the room through the chapel, since you have both male and female attendants. I could see Benno and Mark pale as the situation got more and more out of their control. In all honesty, I wasn't really sure what was happening either. I'm assuming he's writing down like the specifics of the building itself, so that way when they go to construct it, they have everything they need. Because they're going to need to know how many rooms and everything, so yeah. In all honesty, I wasn't really sure what was happening either, but what I did know was that rather than bringing up this business to a construction workshop in the lower city, Ferdinand will be managing the construction himself. That should do it. How does this look? Ferdinand asked, holding out the paper for Sylvester to see. He glanced over it, then gave a satisfied grin. Fast as ever, I see. Basing the architecture on the temple signified matters greatly. All right, then, let's go. Eckert summoned the guards. Sylvester stood up smoothly, Ferdinand and Karstedt following his lead. Benno and Gustav stood up just as Eckert opened the door and called in the guards. I slid off my chair a full beat behind everyone else. I couldn't gracefully get down without the help of an attendant. Sylvester, where exactly are you planning to take us? I asked. To Haas, so that Ferdinand can make the monastery. Where else? Wait, right now? Sylvester nodded as the knights entered the room and formed a line. Ferdinand, you take the lead. Karstedt guard us all from the rear. I'll take Rosemine. You four, get these three on high beasts. Sir. The guards nodded on reflex since it was an order from the Archduke, but they all seemed confused. Whew, I'm glad that I'm not the only one completely baffled by Sylvester doing this without warning. Eckert, take Benno, Cornelius, take Gustav, Daniel, take their attendant. Bridget, protect the Ob's high beast. Quickly. By the time Karstedt had given his speedy instructions, Sylvester was already striding toward the entrance hall. I hurried after him, worried that he would forget I existed and leave without me otherwise. Stand down, get out of my way. Sylvester declared in a powerful voice befitting an archduke. The eyes of every attendant and waiter who had been waiting in the hall shot open, and they immediately hurried over to the wall. I saw Frida look to me for an explanation, but I didn't really understand what was going on either. Go, Ferdinand. Understood. Open the door. No sooner had the attendants opened the double doors for him than Ferdinand summoned his white high beast right in front of himself. He ignored the store employees clapping their hands over their mouths to contain their gasps, instead leaping onto his winged white lion and soaring into the sky. Sylvester followed his example by summoning a three-headed Cerberus-esque lion. Oh my god! I would love to see that animated! Oh my god! He then hefted me up, climbed onto it, and flew out of the store. As the high beast burst out of the restaurant, those passing by yelped in surprise and dove to the ground. I tried to apologize to them, but the mana-driven high beast I was on was moving at such a tremendous speed that it was hard to imagine they heard me. Sylvester, I think going to Haas this soon is just plain reckless. It's too sudden. I thought back to Gustav, who had been frozen in place with wide eyes, and Mark and Benno, whose faces had been twitching with terror. None of them were permitted to lose control of themselves in front of the Archduke. It kind of seemed like Gustav was confused throughout that entire meeting. That might be a problem. I just hope that the shock of riding on a high beast doesn't give him a heart attack. Here's hoping not. I don't want Frida to come back to a dead grandfather. Sylvester huffed. This is all according to our plan. Just as you all planned things out ahead of time, we three talked and made our own plans. As we passed over the city's outer walls, the people down below pointed at us and yelled in surprise. We then soared past some farms and a small forest, taking us straight to Haas. It was a pretty small city compared to Ehrenfest, not to mention it didn't even have a noble's quarter. The journey had taken half a day by carriage, according to Lutz and Gale, but on High Beast, it took no time at all. Rosemine, what type of land will be best suited for the workshop? Ferdinand asked, scanning the area from above Haas. I looked around as well, searching for a good place for a paper-making workshop. It would be nice to have both a forest and a river nearby. That seems like a good place there, Sylvester said, looking down and pointing at a spot next to a water wheel. Ferdinand, build it on the other side of that river, far away enough that it won't impact the water wheel. Are you kidding me? What are y'all doing? Are y'all planning on building this right now? Oh my god, how are they even gonna do that? Seriously, magic can't do that, can it? Or am I about to be proven wrong here? So Ferdinand looked around, gave an understanding nod, and then started to descend at Sylvester's instructions. Given that there were so many of us coming along, I had been sure that we were going to talk, or rather, force the city's authority into letting us build here, but Ferdinand was the only one who flew down. He stopped his high beast just a bit above the forest, at which point Sylvester started to soar up into the sky. Back off a little, everyone. Oh, he's actually going to build it! Jesus Christ! What kind of magic do you have, Ferdinand? At Sylvester's order, everybody else followed suit and moved their high beasts away. Sylvester only stopped flying up when Ferdinand looked about as small as my pinky finger. Once Ferdinand had confirmed that we were all in place, he made his shining wand appear as per usual, then took some kind of shiny powder in his other hand. Ferdinand bobbed his wand like a conductor leading an orchestra, and the powder moved as though it had a mind of its own. Oh my god, what the fuck is that powder? What is going on? I can't wait to see this animated. It's going to be insane. We were far enough away that I couldn't actually hear him or tell what he was doing exactly, but I could see the shining powder float up in the air before forming a magic circle and starting to spin around. Sylvester, what is Ferdinand doing? I asked. I want to know too. Making the monastery, of course. What else would he be doing? Come again? Yeah, that's my question. Come again? Wait, what? What? Right now? How? I know magic, but still. The large glowing circle floated higher into the air and shined dazzlingly bright. Then Ferdinand swung his wand down, and the circle began to slowly descend. It gradually vaporized the trees below as it touched them, turning their leaves, branches, and trunks into gleaming white powder, before doing the same to the flowers and even the grass on the forest floor. The huge storm of powder then started to spin inside the magic circle, everything else having been destroyed. What is that? Not something you see too often. It's magic that only the Archducal family is permitted to use. Take a good look. You'll learn it at the Royal Academy one day now that you're my adopted daughter. I imagine that this is how they, add on to the city? Oh my god. That explains why the freaking Nobles' Quarter is made of white stone. If this is how it's made, that would explain it. But wait. Why is the lower city not the same thing if they expanded on it? Because wasn't the Nobles' Quarter the entire city before Sylvester's ancestor came in and took over? Right? Let me know, please. As the magic circle came to rest on the ground, the earth it was covering quickly turned white. It started to twist and develop as though it was liquid. Ferdinand took out the paper from before and threw it up into the air. It floated into the center of the magic circle as if carried by the wind before burning up in golden flames. Then the shining white earth started to change form entirely, as though it was concrete following Ferdinand's instructions. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking at this point, is that the Nobles' Quarter was made the same way. Which makes sense. A big hole opened on one side, then rows of thick pillars shot up into the sky, white earth connecting the space between them like stage curtains. Before I could even process what was happening, the white earth seemed to stop moving. It emitted a blinding light for a second, which then faded to reveal what looked like a tinier version of the temple. It had no noble section and was indeed of a smaller scale, but it was made of the same pure white stone. Yeah, there! That's what I'm saying! Surrounding it was a circle of stone pavement just as big as the magic circle had been. This was the monastery that Sylvester had mentioned. It was gleaming a radiant white, which made it look completely out of place beside the forest and river. See? Now you can get that workshop going in no time, huh? Sylvester was grinning with pride. Benno and Mark were both as pale as ghosts. Nobody had expected that the new workshop was going to be built in the blink of an eye. Except for Ferdinand and Sylvester. Those are the only people who actually knew what was going on. Karstedt probably too, but they're the only three who knew this was going to happen. Sylvester angled his high beast down and started to descend. We could take a look inside. Come on, let's go. Are you sure it's okay for us to stand here? I asked, lightly tapping my foot against the stone pavement once we had landed in front of the monastery. What I expected to be squishy white earth was instead the white stone that I had grown so used to seeing in the temple and the Nobles' Quarter. And to my surprise, it didn't react at all to me standing on it. The monastery was a perfectly normal building, just as it appeared to be. It somehow had several glass windows and a door, but on the inside it was empty. No furniture, no doors. The inside was pure white stone and nothing else. This will be the chapel. We'll need statues of the gods and a carpet. When can these be ready? Sylvester asked. Mark whispered something to Benno, who then replied, I believe the statues will take about 3 months. The carpet will take some time as well. It seemed that he had already asked Mark to check how much it would cost and how long it would take for an art workshop to make the statues. Since I had said that I wanted the workshop and chapel in the same building. That's Mark for you. He's a man who knew how to do his job. I love it. Speed it up and have them ready in 2 months. Make sure it's done in time for the Harvest Festival. Benno, I believe that the temple has a great deal of spare carpet, Ferdinand noted. There should be more than enough for this chapel. I will give you what you need for this monastery. Chapels needed a carpet for each season, and those took a long time to prepare. I thank you ever so much, I said. That carpet will certainly be a big help. Rosemine, there is no need to thank me. I will give you the carpet that you need now, and you shall donate the newly finished carpets to the temple when they are ready. Ferdinand, did you know that being nice can be its own reward sometimes? That said, it was true that the new carpet we were going to have made wouldn't be ready in time for the harvest festival, so there was no need to look a gift horse in the mouth. We walked into a hallway beside the chapel and climbed upstairs, leading us to the boys' dormitory. The doors raised were completely empty. What will you do about the interior doors and the furniture? If they aren't ready by winter, then the orphans will have a hard time living here, Sylvester murmured. Our top priority will be making sure that the chapel doors and the altar are completed prior to the harvest festival. As for furniture, we'll need dinner tables, chairs, cabinets, and beds. Ferdinand listed off everything that we needed while Benno noted it all down in his diptych. Benno, Gustav and I can have the furniture finished quickly if we use our respective wood workshops. Plus, if we pay a few of the wood workshops in the city to make some, then I'm sure that the people will view the monastery more positively. Ingo's was the only carpentry workshop I could go to. He already had his hands full improving the printing press and making boards for the orphanage's winter handiwork, but I was hoping he could help us in finishing before the harvest festival. Seems like the workshop's going to be up and running in no time, huh? Sylvester, please don't ask us to do the unreasonable, I said. This won't be like the temple's orphanage where people's daily needs were already being met. This workshop won't be up and running anywhere near as fast. The orphans in the temple were able to work hard, follow my orders, obey the older grey priest, and equally share the food and profit earned among themselves. But it was hard for me to say whether this workshop here will be ready to begin production anytime soon. They won't even be able to live here until the furniture and other living necessities have been prepared. Plus, the workshop won't start running the second we bring tools over. Fine, I'll wait a bit. But we make a whole miniature temple for you. Get it running fast. As you wish, we'll do it as fast as we can. Once we had completed our tour, Benno, Mark, and Gustav gathered to talk about something. They were probably discussing who would take care of what and when everything would be ready by. Investment was necessary no matter the business you were starting, but as there wasn't many orphans in Haas, the initial investment would be especially high since we were quite literally starting from scratch. I looked over at Sylvester, who was with Ferdinand and Karlstedt. I remember Ferdinand saying that I would be given a budget for this since it was a business for the duchy as a whole. So I was hoping to squeeze some money out of them. Sylvester, I think we might need some funding to cover the initial investment, I said. You spent all your government funding on building this monastery, get the rest yourself. Not only had I failed to get any money, but he had rejected me without as much as a discussion. Apparently that shining powder was fairly expensive. Of course it was. I had heard that something so simple as the parchment the merchants used for magic contracts was expensive. No way would a magic tool that would build an entire monastery be cheap. That said, it would still take a huge amount of money to get everything ready here. It seemed a bit unreasonable to expect me to earn it all myself. I can't cover that much all by myself. What do you think your status is for? Go and gather some donations. Sylvester told me to exploit my position as the Archduke's daughter to finagle donation money from other nobles. Well, that definitely sounds like it would earn me a pretty penny. Are you asking me to wander around the castle with a donation box? I asked, thinking back to the fundraising people I had seen by grocery stores in my Urano days. Sylvester rubbed his temples and shook his head. Jeez, Karlstedt, let Elvira handle this. In that case, Rosemine can stay home with us for now, as Elvira shows her how to earn donations firsthand. Karlstedt said, his eyes wrinkling in a gentle smile. It seemed that I would need to learn how to noble women get donations, and having someone like Elvira teach me the ropes sounded like a great idea. Smart idea. Father, I think you have... Nope, that's not going to happen, Sylvester interjected, interrupting my attempt to thank Karlstedt and take him up on his kind offer. I'll invite Elvira to the castle, and she can work with Florencia on this. We're talking about the duchy's business here. Now that he mentioned it, it made sense to handle the donations in the castle since this was duchy business. I nodded in agreement with Sylvester, but Karlstedt smiled even wider and took a step forward, waving his hand in disagreement. Think about this carefully. Who can say what villains might be lurking in the castle to eavesdrop on our plans? I think staying in my home will be safer and more secure. Nah. If you're talking about stopping information from being leaked, then Rose might need to learn to be more on guard on what she says at all times. Didn't you say that she has to get used to keeping her eyes and ears on her surroundings? They were towering over me on either side as they argued, each with peaceful yet sharp looks in their eyes. Having no idea what was going on, I took a step back toward Ferdinand, who was just quietly watching the proceedings and tugged on his sleeve. I think they both have good points here. Why are they glaring at each other? Ferdinand looked at the two men with a hand on his chin and laughed. They are both correct, because they are both attempting to argue their way into having your chefs stay at their home. They were fighting over something that hadn't even occurred to me. While we were discussing where I should do my donation work on the surface, they were actually fighting over where Ella would be staying. And honestly, that was something I couldn't have cared less about. Wow, that sounds really tedious. Indeed, they both become quite aggravating when food is involved. How about you just travel to the castle from the temple then? It won't take much time at all if you travel by high beast with your knight, rather than by carriage. Good point. They won't need to keep fighting if I decide not to live with either of them, I said with an impressed nod, just as Sylvester and Karstedt each plopped a hand on one of Ferdinand's shoulders. Now, Ferdinand, don't try to sneak her out from under our noses here. Seems like there's a third, slightly more subtle, tedious person here. She's like, I'm done with this. I'm done. Despite their peaceful expressions, they all had scary looks in their eyes, so I scooted away and headed to where Benno was. It honestly didn't bother me where I ended up staying, so avoiding their dumb argument entirely seemed to be the best course of action. Yeah. We need to have this all done before the Harvest Festival. We haven't got the time or money to do that, Benno said, his head in his hands. I wasn't expecting this either, Gustav sighed. What's your plan, Benno? I stepped in between them and looked up. I might be able to get the money by gathering donations from nobles, but there's no helping how little time we have. My sudden appearance must have taken both them and Mark by surprise, as they all gasped and reflexively stood back. They then scanned the area, taking care to see where Sylvester was and what the other nobles were doing. There were guards standing at the monastery's entrance, and Sylvester's group was still preoccupied, but we were far enough away that we couldn't hear them, or vice versa. Once Benno had confirmed that, he whispered to me, Lady Rosamine, are the nobles okay with your absence? They're having a serious debate about where I'll be staying in the coming weeks. It's because I'll be bringing Ella with me wherever I go. She's the one they're interested in. When I explained that they were arguing over my chef, Mark stroked his chin and thought, Master Benno, let us assume that rather than preparing everything the orphanage needs at once, we first deliver boxes of straw appropriate for sleeping on during the current weather. Then we gradually replace these with beds as winter approaches. How long would it take to prepare the tools for the workshop, as well as the food and other daily necessities needed for the priests to live here? Benno scratched his head. Even if the old geezer and I divide the work between us, we'll still need about a month. Yes, that seems feasible. Though in all honesty, I would like a bit more time than that, Gustav said with a frown. It was safe to say it would take at least 1 month to prepare the skeleton of the orphanage, no matter what. Benno and Gustav glanced over at Sylvester while cradling their heads. You think I'll wait that long? Benno asked. It was hard to imagine that someone who'd had an entire monastery built in a single day, and then expected the workshop to be running a few days later, would be very patient. Mark smiled while writing something in his diptych. You may count on me. I will ensure that we both have the funds and the time that we need without any complaints. How will you do that? I asked while looking up at Mark. He gave me a smile that seemed to say there was no problem at all. We will buy time by selling the recipes our customers want so much. Mark's idea was to delay opening the Italian restaurant by 1 month, or potentially 2, while we rushed to have the monastery prepared before fall. Meanwhile, we could lend our chefs to those who were interested for a fee and sell our recipes. The chefs will, of course, need payment even when the restaurant is closed, so all we need to do is have them work elsewhere. You're just going to refer to the nobles' quarter in the castle as elsewhere? Like they're nowhere special? But that aside, it was a good idea. The chefs would earn enough money and would have something to do while we waited to open the restaurant. Meanwhile, Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstedt could each get one of my trained chefs to serve them. So it works out all around. When we returned from the monastery to the Italian restaurant, I called Hugo and Todd over to introduce them. These two are the chefs who cooked today's meal. They are two of the very few people who can make the recipes I invent, I said with a smile. Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstedt looked at them with gleaming eyes. They honestly looked like carnivores about to pounce, and I noticed my two chefs recoil in fear of being targeted by the nobility. We were planning on sending out invitations to all sorts of major store owners after today's meal in order to lead into the opening of the Italian restaurant. But we need to prepare the monastery at once, don't we? To that end, we have decided to delay opening the restaurant a bit longer. Doesn't that mean we won't be able to eat here again? Sylvester asked, shooting me a dissatisfied glare. His hunger for my food was a good sign. The more he missed it while the restaurant was closed, the more he would be willing to do to get it. The waiters we borrowed from other stores will have places to work even when we keep the Italian restaurant closed. But the chefs have nowhere else to go. Therefore, I will lend you each a chef for a fee until the restaurant opens. Sylvester twitched his finger. Ferdinand fixed me with a gaze, and Karstedt grinned in amusement. All three had taken the bait. I glanced at Mark, who nodded slightly while maintaining his peaceful smile. My recipes are somewhat unique, and so must be taught by a well-trained chef. For that reason, I will charge 5 large silver per month for 1 chef. I will also charge 1 small gold for each recipe taught. I have currently taught my chefs 30 different recipes, including the ones served today. A small gold for each recipe. Isn't that a little expensive? Karsta asked, stroking his mustache with a surprised expression. I widened my eyes as if shocked and offended. Expensive? When I taught Frida the pound cake recipe, she paid me 5 small gold to monopolize the recipe for a single year. She agreed on the spot, saying that it was cheaper than she expected, I said, looking over to Frida and Gustav. In my opinion, I'm giving you all an outrageous deal because of the consideration you've shown me, because we're family, and because we won't be signing monopolization contracts. Frida put on a very merchant-esque smile. Lady Rosemine's recipes are simply that valuable. I believe that men of your status are surrounded by high-quality food at all times, and can thus understand how valuable today's food truly is. In fact, I would love to buy that bread recipe myself, and will be willing to pay as much as 8 small gold for it. I smiled at Frida's total lack of hesitation to announce what she wanted, at which point Benno began describing his own contracts with me to further support my position. When my humble store, the Gilberto Company, bought exclusive rights to make and sell hairpins from Rosemine, we paid 1 large gold and 7 small golds. It was valuable information that only she knew. But even though Benno and Frida were merchants, they were close associates of mine. It was hard to take their words at face value. And so Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstedt all wore dubious expressions as they searched for the truth. I do not recall you charging for the sweets recipes you made for us at home. That is because you and Mother provided 3 rooms for me, 1 at home, 1 at the castle, and 1 at the temple. You also prepared my baptism clothes, hired tutors for me, and above all else, welcomed me with all your heart. I've already paid you back how I can, so now it makes sense that I would start charging. I crossed my pointer fingers in an X to emphasize that I wasn't going to budge on the matter. Sylvester and Karstedt each knitted their brows in thought, while Ferdinand simply agreed to pay the price I asked for with a composed expression. You ultimately intend to use this money for the orphanage, correct? I will have all 30 of those recipes you mentioned, and hire 1 chef for the 1-month period. The money will be paid when the chef begins work. Which of your 2 will be coming to the temple? Markin once again whispered to Benno, who then gave Ferdinand an answer. Todd. The chef standing on my left will join the temple's kitchen. I glanced over at Todd. He had gone completely stone-faced, no doubt feeling the pressure as 3 nobles looked him over. We will need to spend tomorrow closing off the area and preparing the recipes, so I asked that we be allowed to send you the chefs the day after. Very well then. Todd, come to the temple at second bell the day after tomorrow. Yes, my lord, Todd squealed, kneeling on the spot. At that sight, Ferdinand's lips slowly curled into a grin. And now 1 chef remains, he muttered. There were 3 nobles who wanted a chef, but only 2 who were up for hire. Someone will be missing out. Oh, who's going to pay? Who's going to pay? All right, I'll pay. Send the other chef to our home, Rosemine. Hold it, Karstedt. Can you really move that much money without any scholar here? I think not. Ferdinand said, giving Sylvester an exasperated look. He apparently needed the permission of scholars before he could make a purchase like that. Doing things as the Archduke wasn't quite as easy as it seemed. Well, yeah, of course he's going to have to do that, considering you don't want him to blow through the entire thing of the Ehrenfest budget, you don't think? But you'll be paying when the chef arrives, yeah? They don't need the money to be paid right here, right now. At that, Sylvester and Karstedt started to argue over who would get Hugo, causing every commoner present to tense up. It was clear by Benno's expression that he wanted me to do something about this. I nodded and suggested that all the commoners leave the room. I will inform you all when Hugo's workplace is decided. Would you all please clear the room from us? At my suggestion, every commoner gracefully yet speedily exited the room. Hugo, who was caught in the middle of a battle between nobles, had turned ghostly pale. He clutched his stomach and pulled Todd out of the room. Rosemine, why don't you have 3 chefs? You can't really blame me for this. As I watched Sylvester continue to throw a tantrum, I fell into deep thought. How about I lend him to whoever plans to buy the most recipes? Who wouldn't buy all of them? Sylvester shouted. Well, thank you for your business. Sylvester had probably just blurted that out in the heat of the moment, but I didn't care as long as the recipes got sold. Very well then. Well, I'm not sure whether you would actually be able to pay for them all due to that scholar business. I will keep your offer in mind, Sylvester. If you are permitted to spend the money, then I will send Hugo to the castle. Father can send his head chef there as well, so that Hugo can then teach both your chefs. How does that sound? Acceptable. Be sure to send the chef over as soon as you can. Of course, I will bring him with me the day after tomorrow. And so Sylvester, Ferdinand, and Karstedt each settled on buying all of my recipes. We wrote out a contract and ironed out the rules of employment, which I took as an opportunity to mention that my chefs had each signed a magic contract that prevented the illicit spread of my recipes. If at any point you try to force any information out of my chef, I will take him home with me, and there will be no refunds, I said threateningly, trying to keep Hugo safe among the court chefs at the castle. Okay. I feel bad for you. This is freaking insane! I can't wait to see some of this stuff animated. It's gonna be insane! Especially making the freaking monastery in one day! Anyway, I'll get to work on everything and I'll see you guys next time.